Hello, my friends. I'm Samantha, and welcome to the Sedge Circle podcast. How are you today? I hope you are well. I haven't talked much on the subject of magic lately, at least not specifically. Sometimes the universe pulls me in certain directions and inspires me to deliver certain messages. Every podcast I've made has been the result of that inspiration, and they are very much on a whim. Lately, I've been feeling like I've set a good foundation in past podcasts to really begin getting into the nitty-gritty of magic and witchcraft. But first, I want to talk about the word magic. Magic is almost an overused word. So much, I'm afraid, it's lost a lot of its meaning. And I have talked a lot in the past about what I perceive magic to be. But in case you are new to the channel, I'll touch on it again. Magic is the act of shaping your life, and others, should they ask, through the manipulation of abundant cosmic energies. Now, I know there are quite a few folks out there who might disagree, or they might suggest that I am oversimplifying it, and I invite them to do their own podcast on the subject. But what is more powerful an act than shaping your own life, than knowing yourself, knowing your needs and desires? We're told every day what our needs and desires should be through advertising and social media. But what are truly yours? Magic to me is like knowing how to write code for computers. We have a code, and if we want to change things, we change the code. If we want to add or subtract things, we change the code. Magic is the cosmic code we use to enact change in our own lives. It is the amulets, the charms, and the mantras we use to remind ourselves of and attune ourselves to our intentions. Magic is so much more than manifesting and getting what you want. I think the most powerful act of magic is simply changing yourself. And there is nothing wrong with being happy and comfortable with who you are. But as my dear grandmother used to say, the day I stop growing is the day I die. And there are always ways we can elevate ourselves, gently and intentionally. And this power is incredibly underrated. So with all that being said, on to how I magic. Feel free to grab a pen and paper to write these steps down for your own use later on. The very first thing I do is decide what I want. Now, this might sound simple, but it rarely is. Maybe you don't need more money, but better financial habits. Maybe you don't need the love of another, but to cultivate love for yourself. And maybe you don't need to banish something, but the courage to face it. There are always many aspects to consider, and I do not recommend jumping into a spell or ritual blindly. It can be difficult at times to really pinpoint what our needs are. Before conducting any spells or rituals of any kind, I usually take a moment to meditate or even spirit walk. I might also do some kind of divination to decipher the current energies that are surrounding me at the time. And once I have a clear vision of both those energies and my desire, I move on to the next step. Because you cannot plot a course if you don't know where you're starting from. Meditation and divination help you to figure out where you are, and spirit walking, or what some might refer to as astral projection, help you to figure out what it is you need. Take plenty time to refine and focus your intentions. The next thing I will do is to decide what kind of ritual I need to conduct. Do I really need to banish something, or do I need to bring something into my life? Almost every spell or ritual falls into one of these two categories. Typically, for long-term spells like courage or peace, I will create an amulet or a touchstone, which is something I can wear as a reminder of that magic and that intention. But if I am banishing, I find it's best to work the spell and be done with the components, as they can have lingering energies that you don't really want to keep around. The next thing I consider is astrological timing. Now, I don't necessarily bind myself to doing certain spells in conjunction with certain astrological signs. However, I do prefer to work with the phases of the moon and the seasons. If I am banishing, I would typically do that kind of magic just after or even on the full moon. If I'm trying to attract something, I will work that spell on the new moon or just after. But sometimes I may not feel like I can wait. So, instead of banishing fear, I might ask for courage instead. Sometimes spells can wait. Otherwise, you can always change the intention to fit the moon cycle should you wish to. Or you can forget all that and just do the spell. I have had a lot of success in the past without consulting the moon phase or what sign we are currently in. To me, those things are just another helpful layer. And I know that, again, there are a lot of folks who would definitely disagree with that. But this is, again, as I always say, this is not the way, it's a way. And it's my way. The next step is the fun part for a lot of folks, and that is the spell components. What herbs will you use? What stones? What candles? We are spiritual beings, but we thrive on physical representations. The physical parts, like our altars and spell components, are a way for us to bring the spiritual into the mundane. We create a tiny cosmos there on our altars, where the possibilities are endless. When I am choosing components, I very much rely on color. Each color is associated with a different kind of magic. I will choose different colored candles and stones depending on my need. I rely on color a lot in magic, as different colors vibrate at different wavelengths and help us to connect and attune to those vibrations. The next thing I consider is offerings. I feel offerings should always be given to maintain balance. I prefer to make offerings of biodegradable things like bird seed, food, drink, and the like. A wise witch will always consider what a spell leaves behind. Are there offerings safe for wildlife? Will something I pour out onto the soil harm the plants? I never, ever leave something in nature that could become litter or harm the local flora and fauna. And I'm always careful of having open flames in nature, as I am someone who reveres nature. I cannot see harming it beneficial to my craft or myself. So when the time comes to conduct my spell or ritual, I will also prepare a simple feast, something like a small cake or a cookie, as well as a drink. I have a lot of fun with this part myself, and I try to choose foods that correspond to the season or intention I am working with. Eating something, even a nibble, is grounding after a ritual or spell work. Usually I will also include a little of this food in my offering. I find this to be a very important step, as I have experienced anxiety and even panic after a ritual if I did not ground myself. You can also simply stand barefoot and visualize any extra energy being given back to the earth to be recycled. So once you have all of this gathered and well thought out, it's time to perform your ritual or spell. Now, of course, this can look like anything. There are countless books with countless spells in them. And I personally prefer to write my own spells and then to later transcribe them into my spell book. But if you aren't feeling up to that, it's just as good to take a spell from a book. What matters is that your heart is in it. I tend not to downplay pre-made spells. I feel that any act that seeks to empower someone is a good thing. So when I'm finished, I will carefully dispose of anything left from my workings. In some cases, it might be beneficial to keep a journal of how you felt during the ritual, as well as the outcome. You can always revisit the same ritual later, should you feel the need to, and make changes. So in a nutshell, that is the order of operations, if you will, of conducting a spell or ritual. And I know it might sound like a generic outline to some, but I feel it's the little extra steps I've included that make it a little more unique. I prefer not to overcomplicate things, both magically and in my mundane life. I find keeping things simple allows for more movement and more flow. It leaves space for any adjustments or corrections I might feel I need later. And as always, feel free to tailor this to whatever benefits you best. So I suppose that is all I have to say today. As always, if you like the podcast and want to show your support, the best thing you can do is to subscribe to my channel and like this video so that others have an easier time finding it. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me today, my friends. And until we meet again,